So welcome to ORD Survey Webinar number 3, Mapping and Point Cloud Workflows. For those who don't know me, Jonathan Rawlings, I work in geometronics and primarily the remote sensing group. Used to work up in Region 1 as the lead for the field and mapping group for quite a few years. Came down here a little less than 2 years ago. I've been working on ORD for about the past year, maybe, on some of these workflows and how things are going to work on the mapping and point cloud side. So today, hopefully, we can finish up the kind of processing topo files in ORD. And then the next 2 weeks, Kevin is going to take over and jump into some right-of-way stuff that we've learned since our initial ORD survey training. And that's really the point of these webinars, if you haven't watched the first two, is to get this information out on stuff that we've learned from since we had those initial ORD survey training. So it's not going to show you every little click that you need to do, but it's pretty much just the new stuff. So last week I went over the 3 types of linear features. So we got dynamic link, point list, and graphical features, and we looked at making different edits to that data. So knowing those 3 types of linear features and how they interact is very important for when you're making edits. So I also touched on how to fix the lagging decorators issue in your backstage user settings, because you will be using decorators quite a bit, and it can get really annoying when your file starts to drag and get sluggish from those. So there is a way to fix that. If you want to go back and watch webinar 2, it's got it in there. And I also discussed a workflow on how to do a drainage study if all you have are diagrams of your pipe network with written inverts by adding 2 new points at the end locations of the pipe. Each of those points snap to an inlet or manhole, and then modifying those points to create dynamic lines with flow line elevations, and then adding any necessary descriptions. Again, if you shoot your pipes directly in the field at flow line or with offsets, that's not necessary, but I know some people, primarily the way we did it in Region 1, had fairly extensive drainage studies. We would just draw diagrams on a piece of paper and do it in the office. So today, I'm going to walk through the process of combining all this data into one working file and making edits across the different topo files. And I will build the terrain as we bring in the different files, and then I will discuss an easy way to modify that terrain boundary. So the method shown in the original ORD survey training caused a lot of grimaced faces, at least from the classes I was working with, because it was a little bit of a painful process, especially for bigger terrains and topo files. And then if time allows, which I don't really think it will, I will show the confidence point workflow. If I don't get to it, Kevin will get to it the week after. And I'm trying to condense what I'm putting in each one of these, because the last 2 I put a lot of information in and I had to go through it pretty quickly. So before we get into a demo, I want to go through kind of some guidelines on editing these different type of features. And I've struggled with how to get this information out on editing all these different features, because there's no real step-by-step process you can do, because there's a lot of different factors, because we've got 3 different type of features. And it matters, sequential numbering, all kinds of different things. So it's really hard just to have a step-by-step, you do this, this, and this. So I wrote these guidelines to kind of give you some ideas of what you have to keep in mind. So for dynamic link features, to change the linear feature definition or field code of that line, you need to change the field code of all the points that make that line. When you change the field code of the points that make that line, it will auto-update the line feature definition to match the points. That's one of the beauties of dynamic link features. The dynamic link features are really ORD's first choice of lines. That's what it's going to look for creating first. So if possible, you want to keep all of your features as dynamic link features, because it's going to maintain, consistent data. And you will see, though, that that's not going to always be possible. That's not always going to be possible as you're making these edits. It's just going to have to be converted to a point list feature for ease of editing. But if you can, try and keep those dynamic link features. With dynamic link features, sequential point numbering is important unless you use the transpose tool, the append tool, or insert point tool. And this goes back to all of our data in our survey field book. It's civil data, and that adds intelligence to it. So when you use transpose, of course, transpose will reverse the order of the line. So if you have a break line 1, starts with point number 1, goes up to point number 10, that start code is going to be on point number 1. Initially, if you want to transpose that and reverse it, it's going to move that start code to point number 10 and put the order of those points 10, 9 down to 1. And it will still be a dynamic link feature. If you use append, so the append tool adds a point to the end of a line. So it will assign that field code to that point. If you've got a break line 1 with 10 points on it, and then you got another point at the end of that, that is maybe a break line 20, and you want to add one of those points to that break line 20 to that break line 1, you can use the append to add it to the end of break line 1. It will change that point on break line 20 to break line 1. And it could be a totally different point number. So if you got 1 through 10, your break line 20 is on 50 to 100. Your line, your dynamic link line, your BL1 dynamic link line can go 1 to 10, and then at the end, it would have that 50 from your break line 20 on there. And then insert point, similar type of thing. You can have these out of order if you use those 3 commands. And we'll see examples of this as I merge all this data together and start doing some of that. The other kind of guideline with using dynamic link features is to use encodes on your line work. This is something we have not done in the past, and we didn't do it with En-ROADS because En-ROADS didn't recognize encodes, but now that we have dynamic data, we need to start using these encodes. The encodes will prevent lines with similar field codes among different files from joining together. So there is a process you can do in Infinity to easily add all those encodes on your data. So let me pop up my Infinity window. So I've opened Infinity. I've got a topo file loaded into Infinity. You can see I've got point numbers, break line. So if I want to go add encodes to all these, so I'll have a start code and an encode at the end of every line, I can go to my backstage of Infinity. I don't think they call it this. Maybe they do, but it's very similar to your ORD. I can go to my info and settings, to my features section. And in that features section, I have the option to, I did it again. I have the option to add an END to this inline section. So I've got my start codes on my begin line, begin area, and then if I want to add my encodes to these lines, all I need to do is put that END on this inline section. And whenever you go export this data, so here I've got my data, I'm going to export it, set my type of data that it is. I can use my standard ODOT template that we've got, and I can export it using that standard template. I've already done it, as you can see here. I'm going to cancel out of that. Bring up my... So this is that Infinity CSV file with the encodes on it. So here I've got my first point EP. It's got my start code. Go down to the end of that line. It puts an encode on it. White stripe has a start code. It adds the encode on it automatically. So this is going to be important. Whenever we bring in data to ORD, we've got dynamic link features, and we have similar field codes among different topo files. You'll see those start to kind of join up without those encodes on it. So.
And it's critical, John, too, that as you see in this data set here, you don't have those string identifiers on your line codes. You just have EP. You don't have EP1 or EP12.
That is correct. Yes.
So yeah, without that end code, any other just plain EP in there is going to join to this first line in this file.
Yep. Yeah, if that other EP doesn't have a start code,
Correct.
which we will see that happening. So for different things. It's important to understand we have dynamic link, point list, and graphical features because that all comes into play as we edit. So get back to this. This is just a slide showing that same thing. Again, just add your encode to that inline row there, and it should work for you. So that was dynamic link features. So editing point list features, some guidelines that I came up with. Whenever you edit point list features, whenever you convert a dynamic link feature to a point list feature, it removes that start code from the initial point of the line. This is where things can get kind of messy. If you add the start code back to the line, it creates a new dynamic link feature in addition to the existing point list feature. So you would then have two features there. And it can get really confusing if you have joined two or more lines with different field codes. So if you have a break line 1 with a stringing ID of 1 in one file, and you have another file next to it, another topo file with a break line 2, and you join those two together using point list features, the points that make up that point list feature can have all of the ones on BL1, the points can still have that BL1 field code. All of the ones that were originally on BL2 can still have that BL2 field code, but yet you have one line that's just a break line all connected up. So if you bring in another file and you added a start code to one of these, it can join all this stuff up. So you'll see it. I have an example, and I've showed it in the past, but I'm going to point it out in a little more detail today. So the recommendation is just to avoid doing this. If you convert it to a point list feature from a dynamic link feature, just leave it as a point list feature. There's no reason to go back to a dynamic link feature. Another guideline is that a point list feature can have different field codes on the points, which I just described, but be aware that those points can still join with other points that have the same field code, so most likely in a different data file. And again, ORD wants to create those dynamic link features first. So if you do have those similar field codes and sequential numbering, so it also takes sequential numbering because dynamic link linear features work off of sequential numbering, unless you use those 3 specific editing tools, those points will join to create this unintended dynamic link feature. But again, we can fix it all by just adding those end linking codes to the endpoints of the lines. So go back to your Infinity settings and make sure you add that END to the end line. Another guideline on point list features is you can combine them using the join tool, and you can reorder the points using your manage point list. So this is probably the biggest reason to convert a dynamic link feature to a point list feature is to combine 2 lines across different files or even in the same file, and then to reorder the points if you need to. But again, there are certain scenarios where if you have a dynamic link feature, you can do the same thing, but you have to have the right, all the stars aligned, I guess is the best way to put it. So. And then editing graphical features. I didn't really touch on this a whole lot last week, and I'm probably not going to touch on it a whole lot this week because I think you should use it sparingly because we have other methods for getting graphical features into our field book. And that other method, I have a video on YouTube, is through Topodot and use their feature code export tool. So I'm not going to say you can't use or you even shouldn't use graphical features, but it does have a lot of downsides. So graphical features are not associated with a data file. So they reside in either your all linear features or your all point features heading, not under any data file heading. Editing elevations on linear vertices is way more difficult. So graphical features do not have points made up of them. All you've got is your vertices, your graphical vertices. So you don't have any of those points in the survey details that you can manipulate. And if you've ever tried to manipulate a line, manipulate the vertices of a line using the properties dialog, it is not designed for editing elevations easily. Excuse me, easily. If you are using point clouds, which is one of the main reasons you may have graphical features, you can cut sections and easily modify elevations graphically in your cross-section view using your Microstation commands. But again, if you're using point clouds, we've got another method for getting all those graphical features into our field book using the feature code export tool. One of the pluses of graphical features is that you can use your Microstation commands to edit your features, and your terrain automatically updates if you've created your terrain. So you can go in and insert and delete vertices. You can extend the line. You can modify your vertices using the modify command. You can move and rotate them, and your terrain is going to automatically update as you do all these. You do have to be careful using your break element command, because it will drop part of your line from the field book, depending on how you break it. There's different ways to break elements. If you break at a point, it's different than if you break a portion of a line or a partial line. And if you are working with complex chains, you must simplify your geometry for it to work properly in your terrain. If you just create a complex chain without simplifying the geometry, it will not work in your terrain. It has to do with it being a line string versus a line. So I will try and do an example of that. And when you import graphical features, you must set your terrain model attribute manually. It is automatically assigned to do not include, and this will trip you up probably numerous times. You have to go in and say either determined by definition or whatever else you want it to be. If you do determine by feature definition, of course, it's going to automatically apply whatever we have set in the feature definition. So those are just some quick guidelines on the three different types of features: dynamic link, point list, and guide and graphical features, and things to keep in mind when you're making these edits. So moving on to terrains, because that's really what I want to get to today. I believe this was talked about some in the initial ORD survey class, but I just want to reiterate that there are dynamic and static terrains. If you create a terrain from your survey field book data, which is what we are going to be doing here at ODOT, they are dynamic terrains. If you create a terrain by importing directly from a DTM, or from an ASCII file, it will be what they're referring to as a static terrain. So the DTMs we created in En-ROADS were, I don't know, I would classify them as less than static. So they were totally detached from our survey data. So all of our, all that static means is that you manually need to update the terrain from the source file. With dynamic terrains and a survey field book, you are working with civil data, which adds intelligence, and the field book and the terrain are linked. So when you modify your field book data, the terrain modifies dynamically on the fly. The positive side of this is that the terrain is always up to date, but with huge files, you may have performance issues due to that data being live and always updating. So the question's going to come up, well, how big is huge? Well, we have yet to find that magic number on when you need to maybe think about making a couple different terrains out of this file. If you think you're getting there, reach out to us. We can help you with doing that. And as most of us saw in the initial ORD training, with the data being linked, we cannot just delete the triangles easily like we did in En-ROADS. And there is a way to get around this, and I will show it in the demo. And that disappeared. So I've made all my edits to my individual topo files. I'm going to use the same data that I used last week. And I'm going to create my new field book where I'm going to merge all these topo files together. So I've already created my SK, my project-wise named file. I am not working in project-wise, I'm working locally. It's just easier for the demos for me. So I'm going to create my field book where I'm going to merge all those individual SQLite files like we talked about last week. So I can go to my field book tab, new field book. So I'm going to give it the 20485. Merge this all together here. So I have my individual SQLite files that maybe the field crew's been bringing in every couple of days, and the analyst is then grooming those, or the field crew is grooming those and passing them on to the analyst. I've already got all these TO2 or SQLite files together here. So I'm just going to start importing them into this all are merged field book. So I can right click on this field book, import my Bentley survey format, start with my first file. So last week I made these edits on the individual files and saved them as the SQLite. And if you notice, one of the things I did was I added this water line I extended this water line onto the water valve. That is still showing up in my SQLite file. I removed some lines from my confidence points because they're points and they don't need lines. All that is staying with this SQLite file. So I can go ahead and import my next file. My next file, I've got some utility locates. I've got a couple files in here. I'm going to go ahead and make my terrain so I can see this build as I go. This is where you'll see the dynamic nature of ORD. So I can right click on my fieldbook name, create terrain model. It automatically creates that. I can see what it's doing. No feature definition is assigned. I can go assign what feature definition I want using my element properties. For now, I'm just going to look at my triangles. And I really hate green triangles, so I'm going to go fix that in my element templates. Drilling into my template for existing triangles. I just can't stand green ones, so I'm going to go change it. I really like orange ones. And I really like them dashed, just to kind of stand out from everything else. But I do notice one thing up here. This was a file that I brought in, this T10. Again, I can see right there it is. I have a vault here, it looks like, that I don't really want to triangulate to that vault. So I'm going to go change that. So I can go select this. And there's a couple things I can try here. I can go terrain model attribute determined by feature definition. So our vaults are automatically set to triangulate. I don't really want that in this case. I'm going to say do not include, but notice it's still triangulating to it. So it's still triangulating to it because I changed the line instead of the points that made up the line. So let me do an undo on that. Check this again. I can get the right thing. So notice it's back to determined by feature definition. So I want to get all the points for that and change all the points to really update that, line. Set that to do not include. And it automatically updated. So it's no longer triangulating to that, which is what I want.
So do you have to go back and change the line too?
Good question, Kevin. I do not. Notice my line is now set to do not include.
So because it's a dynamic linked feature, it read what the points were doing.
That is correct, yes. We didn't stage that question, by the way. So I've got 2 files in here. I can now save this field book as an SQLite file, just as a backup. So it names it the same. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Going to bring in my other files. And I'm going to start making edits across these different files here once I get enough of them in. This one's just confidence points. Again, I can drill into here and see what's in there. CMP. Well, I guess it did have a CMP, but then mostly just confidence points. Import my next file. T21. So now I've got a little more terrain data coming in here. I can see one of the things I didn't show last week was the close command. So up under your edit, you've got this option to close features. Let me turn off my terrain. I can easily do that with my level display. And this e-terrain display general level turns everything related to the terrain off graphically. So I had this concrete pavers in here. If you don't know what this is, when you're editing this, I can go set my geographic coordinate system. So that's set. I know it's OCRS Columbia River East. And I can go turn on my aerial. Kind of show you what this looks like here. So I got a structure going over I-84. This is out by Cascade Locks. And there's some slope pavers here. I edited this in the original CSV file that I had done. So it's already got this closed command on it. But I'm going to remove it real fast and show you how I did that. Turn the aerial off. And from the East webinar, I learned about this handy dandy drawing scale toolbox. I recommend you find that and use it, because right here it's going to get convoluted if I have this set at 1:100 with these 2 points. So can easily change my drawing scale. So here I've got a close command. I can use this, close the linear feature back on itself, it says when I hover over this. I can select that. It's asking me to locate my linear feature. I can left click on that feature. It's asking me, do I want to use a closed shape, true or false? True will make the line look like this. Go ahead and do that, see what it looks like. Right click to get out of that, turn my terrain back on. Notice it extended those 2 lines and it's going to triangulate to those. I do not want to do that. I've tried to think of a reason why I wouldn't want to do that ever, and I can't think of one. So I'm going to undo that. Let me do this again using the other option. Again, it's asking me to locate my linear feature. So I'm using my arrow keys to go up and down. Now I'm setting that to false, and it automatically closes that and applies that close linking code to that point, which automatically closes it back on the start point. So I've made some edits. So I'm now going to export this again or save it. It's export to, but it saves it as a Bentley survey format. I can save it as the name and go ahead and overwrite what I just did. Bring in my other file, other files. You can only bring in one of these at a time. So T22 is my next file. So I'm getting some more data in here. So this is interesting. You know, maybe one crew collected this one day and then we had another crew that was up collecting this coming the other way on a different day. We need to, you know, fix these 2 different features that are coming in together here. I'm going to go ahead and use my decorators, turn on my names so I can see how these are aligned. Go ahead and turn on my field codes. So these are dynamic link features. Again, I can hover over this, use my pop-up, drill into here, generated by link codes, which means it is a dynamic link feature. So this is a YSL1 on the field code. I've got another dynamic link feature coming in this way that is also a YSL1, but it starts up at this direction and goes this way. So I got one going this way, one going this way. Again, if I want to join these as dynamic link features, you need the sequential numbering, which I'm not going to have on this. So I can show you how that could possibly work. I can swap this, transpose it. They both got the same linking code. Maybe I want to get rid of the start code on this one. So they're connecting up, but I've got things all out of order here. I don't really know what's going on. I'm going to use undo. And again, you need to use undo sparingly because you can corrupt your files. I'm getting a little wild on my undo. Uh-oh. I accidentally deleted my T file right there. So that was in T22. And what's going on? What I've discovered is anytime you use undo and you delete a data file, you are going to get corruption in your field book. So you have to be cautious with using undo. You can use it, just be very cautious. So notice I no longer have my used filter here that I was wanting to see. So if I want to turn my terrain back on, I've got it back on. Let me try and import T22 again. And I was able to corrupt this file so bad that I couldn't even import T22 again. So now it's not going to let me import T22 again. So thankfully, I was saving my SQLite file with each one of these edits. So I'm now, just to be safe, I'm just going to go create a whole new file. I'm going to exit out of this and create a whole new file. Questions while that's loading?
Yes, so we were talking about at the beginning the dynamic linked features with the start and end lines. If they do, instead of collecting like all the EPs and then working their way through, did it in a cross-section format, would that create an issue?
It should not. It should know that line and how it's all done with the cross-section in infinity. It should not create an issue.
I know some software does have issues with that, so good.
That is a good question, though. So because I was, saving my SQLite files, I've got backups of all this. I can easily go back to the point where I was. So I've got my file loaded, my new file that I know is not messed up. I'm going to go import that SQLite file that I've been saving. I can go to my field book, Bentley survey, and I called it my all merged. Go ahead and open it, import. Jump in here and I'm back to my data. Of course, I lost my terrain, but my terrain is linked to my survey data. So that's easy enough to create when I need to create it. So I can right click on this. Notice I've got, let me show you my data files. I've got my data files in there and I know that I saved it right before I imported that next file. I'm going to go ahead and create my terrain model. Set my definitions on my terrain, feature definitions on my terrain. I'll live with the green triangles for now. They just drive me crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in this T22 again. Turn off my terrain. Notice I've got my filters in here. Just be cognizant of using the undo command. Too much. So I'm going to easily edit these and join them together. So I know that I'm going to set my geographic coordinate system. I want to know which way that line's going. Turn on my aerial. So I can see from my aerial, I've got a bigger area on the, I guess, the left side of the line as you're going from west to east. So I know that my line is going that way. Go ahead and turn this on, turn off my aerial. So I'm going to convert this to a point list feature. Using my context sensitive menu, convert to point list feature. Do the same with this one. I'm going to transpose it first and then convert it to a point list feature. Notice these were dynamic link and had start codes on them at the beginning. It stripped that. And it stripped it from this one. It will leave the end codes on there if you have end codes. So I can go use my join command on this. Locate my linear feature, locate my second linear feature, accept it. And now I can go into my manage point list dialog and rearrange the order of those points. So it started here and went this way, and now it's going that way. So I need to turn on those point numbers. Again, I'm using my decorators, which I'm going to use a lot. I'm going to set my drawing scale a little smaller. 51027 should be my first one. I can find that in the list and just move it up to the beginning and sort these as needed. And I'm going to have to make another little modification here. So that puts them in order, but now I want to add that other line in between it. So I got to add these 60356 in there. Go back to my point list. So I need 356 before 029. And I need 355 before 30. And then 31, and then 354. So that should be in order. So I just created that line. I merged the two together. They are now point list features generated by point list, or one generated by point list feature. So let's import the next few data files. T23. T23 has some drainage. We import T24. So one of these files, I added my T24, I added my drainage study files in there. So I had a diagram showing me how this was all put together. You can see I've got some pipes up here from the locates and then pipes down at elevation from adding them in the drainage study when I edited these originally. So I don't really need those storm locates anymore. I've got them in my original T files, T SQLite files, so I don't need them in my merged. So I can easily just go in there and delete them. That's my CMP. This is my STL. So I'm going to delete those points again. So I want to edit those point features and right click and delete that. I don't need them. Did I have another one there? No, but I didn't do my drainage study for the rest of this. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that there until I got my drainage study completed. So let's bring in the rest of the files. All right, so we get our point renaming tool pop up. It says duplicate linear feature found. It's saying that I've already got a DIT1 in my data over here. So I can go to my differences tab. I've already got a linear feature DIT1 generated by link codes. That's in my field book already. And this is a duplicate. So this duplicate is generated by a point list. So when I say the issues we had with using the point renaming features were with actual points and using renames on the actual points. I have not discovered the same issues if it is a linear feature. I have had success with using the rename tool on these linear features. So I'm just going to add a suffix to it. I know this one's coming from T31. So I'm going to add a suffix to that line name, hit apply. Again, I had the same thing on my break line 1. Hit apply, and on a break line 4, hit apply. So it'll bring those in and keep the data as is. So I can drill into this T31, look at my linear features and the details. Notice it added those T31 on those duplicate features to the name. What I do still have is this ditch 1 field code, break line 1 field code, and break line 4 field code, which I'm also going to have on the other file. But notice what I've got now. So this is where I said having those encodes on your features is going to prevent this from happening, where I get all these lines connected up. So here, these are dynamic link lines, and I've got a ditch 1 start code and then a ditch 1 without an encode. The point numbers are 60634, 60635. And if I go down to where this is connecting up, it better have a higher number than the one I had before. Yeah, so 75509. So it's going to be looking for higher numbers as it goes along. Notice this doesn't have a start code on it, probably because it's going from the other direction. This ditch is starting way down here. It looks like I combined a long ditch as a point list feature generated by point list. Yeah. So that's why it doesn't have a start code on it. So to fix that, I would add my encodes in infinity, or I can come in here, which this is not the best method to do it. It's better to do it in infinity. Add those encodes to the end of these lines. And that was the wrong one. And I haven't had that on, but notice my terrain is updating as I am bringing in this data. So let me bring in my next file. So I didn't do it. So I've got all of my topo files that I have collected in my field book. So now I've got a lot of missing data. You know, we've got all the road, the I-84 roadway, we've got this overcrossing, all kinds of stuff. So we did all this with conventional topo and with point cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and import all that point cloud data. Again, I've done all my mapping in another file and exported all that using my feature code export tool in TopoDot and saved it as an SQLite, and I can very easily just merge it all together here. So I've got my 20485 point cloud mapping. Go ahead and say open. So I've got all my mapping merged into one file here. And I can drill into some of these areas. I'm going to have some crossing break lines that I have to fix. For the sake of time, I'm going to get into the terrain boundary editing, because that's what I didn't get to last week that I want to get to. And we can come back to the editing. If you have issues with editing, reach out. We can help you. But let me get into the terrain boundary editing. So the first thing I want to do is modify any elements that I know I don't want in my terrain. So up here we've got a railroad, and we've got this long gravel, the ballast, the bottom of the ballast right here that we've got. It's triangulating. The feature definition is set to do that. I want to go in and change that Let me do the general there. I don't want this to triangulate at all. So again, it's a dynamic link feature. I can hover it over it. It says creation type generated by link codes. I need to edit all of those points. And it will automatically edit the line. Let's set that to do not include. Okay. And, you know, I don't want my triangulation to come up in here. I don't want this fence to be triangulated. See where my points are. Make these a little bit bigger here so I can see them. So again, this line's going that way, so I can just add a start code onto this point. And then I can edit the points of this line, say do not triangulate. Do not include. And I can keep doing that all the way around. Maybe I don't want this fence to be triangulatable. Again, I can edit the points for that. And instead of doing the terrain model attribute, I know I've got a fence code that doesn't triangulate, so I can edit this code. While that stayed the same, it won't triangulate to it. Let me turn this back on. So you can see I'm no longer triangulating to that feature. So I want to also, maybe I've got an area like right here, there's kind of a big gap where there's no data. I know in the future I'm going to have data. I can go to my ORD Survey ribbon and add an interior boundary in there under the terrain dropdown. Go to my boundary interior. So I can import this feature, this interior boundary, into my survey fieldbook as a graphical feature. So to do that, I can right click on my fieldbook 1, import features from current graphics. Anything that is not in the fieldbook that is a graphic that I've drawn will import into there. Again, it's a graphical feature, so you're limited on what you can do. And if I use this ORD Survey ribbon, it automatically attaches that template to it, which assigns a field code through the feature definition, and we're good to go. It takes a while on the first one. As you do more of these, it gets faster. So,
is the current graphics what's visible in the view or the entire model?
It is the entire model. Good question. Okay. Yes, the entire model. So I've now done my import from graphics. If I hover over this right now, it shows this as being a creation type graphic. Notice it assigned the correct field code to it, BI, and the right terrain model. Well, so this is not the right terrain model attribute. This is one of the things with graphical features. You have to set the terrain model attribute. If you've done everything correctly, you can set it as determined by feature definition. And if that's what you want, if you want it to be triangulatable, you would do that. So I've got my terrain now. Notice my triangles are no longer going across this hole that I've got. But I do have all these other triangles I want to get rid of. So we have, this is dynamic. Our fieldbook and our terrain are dynamic. So they're linked together. So I cannot go, let me go back to my survey menu, go to my edit or my terrain dropdown and go to my edit model. I've got all these different tools that I can use here for editing triangles. I can delete vertex, delete edge triangle. Sounds like it should work. When I go hover over this, I get a little, no sign, says not an editable terrain. Every single one of these, not an editable terrain, because this terrain is linked to my survey fieldbook. So it wants me to update data in my survey fieldbook to modify this terrain. So there is an option under your default heading under your survey data. I can right click on that and deactivate my survey processing rules. So this is going to stop the link between your survey fieldbook and your terrain. I got my edit model up here. I can go check some of these out now. I can delete triangle by line. Notice I can now select my terrain and make modifications. So it's asking me, still got the old one, but I need to define my terrain. And now I should be able to draw a line in here and delete these edge triangles. As I need to do that, I'm going to do this quickly because we're running out of time. So I can work around the edge of this, just going, getting rid of those triangles I don't want. Just like we could pretty much do in inroads, very similar method. Maybe I don't want all those. Okay, I'll do a few more here. Okay, so I deleted the triangles by line. I now need to extract that perimeter that it's put on there as a graphic. So I am going to go to my boundary options. I'm going to add a boundary. And then notice it's asking me to locate a terrain model. I select anything, triangles, contours, exterior, boundary. And it's asking me for the method. Do I want to extract graphic, add a boundary, add a ruled boundary? I just want to extract the graphic. And notice it put a pink line, a magenta line. Let me turn off all of that data there. Turn off my perimeter. Should not be there, yeah. So now I've got just a graphic of the area where I deleted the triangles. So I can go add this now. Let me reactivate my survey processing rules just to show you how this is going to work. So I've deleted those triangles, right? With my survey processing rules deactivated. So nothing was updating. Now, if I go activate this, it's going to say, do you want to revisit all elements? Yes. I now turn on my terrain again, and I've got those triangles back. But I've got a graphic here from what I edited the triangles that I can use to add back to that terrain as a boundary. So I'm going to go up here to feature management. I'm going to add that feature. I have it selected. It's asking me to locate that terrain model. Data point to add what I already have selected, which is that graphical element. And what do you want to add this as? Boundary. There's all the different types of feature types. I'm going to add it as a boundary. And my triangles update to be what I wanted them to be. And it is a graphical element only in your terrain. It is not in your survey field book. So I can go use my insert vertices. I didn't want it to triangulate through here, and it automatically updates as I go. And just to make sure, yeah. So this says deactivate, so I know that my survey processing rules are activated. So when I go modify things, this particular line had the wrong field code on it. So I can go edit those points. It is a yellow double narrow, which is actually a DSN. Can edit that. So now my triangles are updating and triangulating to that. Questions? I do have a slide on this for reference in the future, and we'll make a pretty step-by-step workflow on doing that. But essentially, we deactivated the survey processing rules. We then went through and deleted our triangles by lines using the edit model tools. We created that graphical element of that new boundary. And then we reactivated our survey processing rules in our survey field book. And then we added that graphical boundary to our terrain as a boundary. So, all right. Well, I'm done. So, yeah, give us a shout if you have some questions.